I think Heidi's wonderful. I had the great pleasure of working with Heidi at the Economic Policy Institute in DC for 5 years. Heidi is not, she's not like an international superstar economist, but she should be. People should know about Heidi because what Heidi does every single month, every single day, is she's in the trenches working for policies that lift up workers in the United States. You might not know Heidi's work, but you have read her work every time you pick up the New York Times, you read an editorial about what's going on in the economy. I can tell you that every time you see that, there's been an hour and a half when Heidi has been in her office, turned away from the door, because that's how she concentrates best, I think, huddled on the phone with the New York Times editorial staff, explaining to them what they should expect to see in this month's economic numbers, explaining to them, if this is what happens, it's because of this. If this is what happens, it's because of this. But regardless of what happens, you need to sort of keep in mind the bigger picture, which is, the hardships that working families have been facing for decades. And for all of those reasons, I am very happy to welcome her to the podium today, and I appreciate you taking the time and joining us here.
Appreciate it. So I am going to talk about why President Trump's economic message really resonates, and then what a true worker-first agenda would actually look like. And I'll sort of point out the gap between what a true worker-first agenda would look like and what President Trump has actually done in his first 100 days. So the first thing that I want to say is President Trump's economic rhetoric really resonated because he told the truth when he said the economy is rigged against regular people. There are real underlying factors. Doug talked about a lot of them in the Rhode Island context. I'll give a few slides on what this looks like in the in the national context. But first, I want to give a couple of top lines, which actually look quite good. This is the unemployment rate. Doug showed this for Rhode Island. You can see, if you look at this, this shows it over time since the mid-90s. So if you follow the bumps, you can see the early 2000s recessions. Recessions are always labeled with a gray vertical bar, and then you can see the Great Recession. The unemployment rate reached 10% in the Great Recession, and it has now been at 5% or less for 19 months, for more than a year and a half, and we will get new numbers tomorrow, and the expectations are it will remain well below 5%. So those top lines look really good. We were in this, oh my God, we're all going to die period for a long time, and now we're out of that. I do feel that the Obama administration stressed this accomplishment far too much and did not stress enough the fact that these top lines really mask a ton of variation for different groups, for people at different parts of the country. So I really do think that candidate Trump tapped into that. He tapped into these top lines. Yes, there's been a lot of improvement, but the economy still isn't working for a lot of people. So I'm going to show how that is actually a very true, it's just plain true when you look at the numbers. So this shows it in the employment context. So this shows it in the employment context. Sorry, this map is really irritating to look at, but it's just there to give a general idea. This shows employment growth between 2007, just before the Great Recession hit, and 2016. So over that period, including the Great Recession, the overall economy added on net 7 million jobs. So we went down, and then we're back up and have grown even further. But that is not true if you look at every place in the country. So these are employment changes over that period by county. So it's a little bit hard to read because counties are of different sizes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it gives you an idea. The dark green lines are places dark green boxes are places that saw big employment growth. Light green is a little bit of employment growth. Yellow are places that held roughly steady. Orange are places that lost some jobs, and red are places that lost other jobs. So or lost a lot of jobs. So if you sort of squint your eyes and look for the orange and the red, those are places that are still well below where they were before the recession hit. And you can see where it is. It's outside of big cities in the south. And then you see this big swath along the industrial belt. Western New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio, West Virginia, Indiana, Michigan, Illinois, southern Wisconsin. You really see this swath. And candidate Trump really, really tapped into this fact. And then so this is getting at the fact that the employment growth, while looking actually quite good at the national level, is really inconsistent across the country. And then you have this other question about, okay, so we have jobs back overall, but what's going on with wages? And I think that's really where we start to see some friction between the top lines and how people are experiencing the economy. So this is the median wage over time. Doug showed this for Rhode Island for part of this period. So I want to say a couple things about the median wage. I'm talking about hourly wages, but I just want you to know that this also includes salaried workers. To include salaried workers, we just take what they earn in a year divided by the hours they work. So this is the whole workforce. And just to do the sort of Econ 101, so people remember what the median is. Median is when you line up everyone from lowest hourly wage to highest hourly wage. The median is the person at the dead center. So half people earn less, half the people earn more. So really, it is an extremely good summary measure of what the economy is delivering for the American worker. It's the heart of the labor market, and it's not that good. 1786, that's the median wage in our country. For a full-time, full-year worker, that's $37,000 a year. So last year, during the election, there was lots of polling that was going on. Polling showed that a majority of voters in the fall said jobs don't pay enough to live on, and it is a struggle to meet everyday expenses. When you look at numbers like this, it's absolutely no surprise why people feel like this. And then another thing that I want you to note about this chart is that it's been really flat over this period. This starts in 1973. In 1973, again, this is adjusting for inflation, which is the right way to look at this. In 1973, the median wage was $16.74. So it has grown just 6.7% over this period. If you look in the late 90s, there was a period of growth, and I'll also return to that, but that was when we had extremely tight labor markets in the late 90s, and that helps workers see stronger wage growth. But for the rest of this period, there was real stagnation in wages for the median worker. And I want to just say a couple of things about this. We see this flat line for median wages, but the economy grew a ton over this period. GDP grew a ton over this period. And it wasn't just because population was growing, GDP per capita was growing. So we were getting richer as a country. And sort of even more relevant when you're talking about hourly wages, GDP per hour worked grew dramatically over this period. So GDP per hour worked is also known as productivity. That's when you hear people talking about productivity growth, it's GDP per hour worked. It's the total amount of income produced in the economy on average for 1 hour of human work in the economy. That grew 70% over this period. We were 70% more productive at the end of this period from the beginning. If the economy had been growing fairly over this period, the median wage would have also seen that kind of growth. Instead, the median wage grew less than 7%, so less than 1/10 the rate of overall productivity growth. And the sort of underlying thing there is that growth, that productivity growth, which wasn't going to typical workers, was going somewhere. It was going to the top. It was sort of being captured by people who were already at the top of the wage distribution, and I'll talk more about that. But the sort of bottom line is economy growing well over this period, median wages were stagnant, and so inequality rose dramatically because that growth was going to the top of the income distribution. I want to though say a couple of things about this. All of what I just said is absolutely true. But you could look at this and say, okay, fine though, the median worker isn't actually losing ground over this period. They're holding steady. Why all the anxiety? And I think there's two key things about that. One, that's not the American dream. That is not middle class aspirations. The way we think of middle class aspirations is every successive generation actually does better than the generation that preceded it. And that is not happening anymore. It used to happen. It hasn't actually happened for a long time now, and I think that is a real psychological blow. And then the other, it's not just psychological, it's a real economic blow as well. The other thing that I think is a key part of why stagnant wages are a real problem in the context of rising inequality is that when you are just treading water, which is what we see here, and you see a group of people just going like gangbusters, you very rightly diagnose that the economy is working for them and it's not working for you. When in a context of rising inequality, when you see people doing just fabulous and you are just trying to get by, you rightly feel like this scene is not about me. This is tilted towards someone else. And I think that is why Trump really tapped into that. He talked honestly about that, and I think that's why his message really resonated. And I want to talk one more consequence that I think is very much related to people's anxiety about the economy is that one of the reasons our low wages translate into people not having savings to fall back on in the event of something going wrong in their life. So this is the net worth for median family. And let me, again, it's the median family. Let me tell you what I mean by net worth here. It is the value of all of your assets, absolutely everything. It's your home, it's your car, it's the cash value of all your retirement accounts, it's the cash value of your life insurance, it's absolutely everything you have in assets, minus absolutely everything you have in debts. So subtracting off your home mortgage, your mortgage, your car loan, your credit card debt, your student debt, minus everything else. So it's very important when you look at this to go, this is not liquid assets that people have hanging around. This is their car, this is their home, this is their retirement savings, this is everything. For the median family, that's $81,000. That is why, that's the heart of our savings in this country. $81,000 is the net worth. And this is, again, I'll just talk about some polling. If faced with a sudden, unexpected $500 expense, nearly 40% of voters last fall said they would not be able to handle it. A $500 expense. And I think it's clear when you see something like this, people's wages are not high enough to pay for the high cost of childcare, of transportation, of housing, of health insurance, in order to have enough left over to save, to make sure that you're okay in the event of an emergency, even something just on the order of a $500 emergency. And I think this is a real core part of where people's anxiety is coming from. The money that they're bringing in is not enough to give them a cushion to deal with an emergency or to deal with sending their kids to college or to feel like they're going to have a secure retirement. So the lack of wages that we're seeing translates into this sort of other layer of anxiety that people are feeling. And again, I think Trump really tapped into this. The wages piece, the jobs piece, he made people feel like he really understood this and he was going to do something about it. What we have seen since he got into office instead is that over and over and over again, he's either turned his back on workers or he's actually actively worked against their interests. So I'm just going to list a few of those things, but before I do that, I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't do one more thing along these lines. The next slide I'm going to show is not something Trump used to reach people with, but I just think it's very important to just get it out there. This shows that exact same chart that we just saw, but by race and ethnicity. So it's net worth, it's not people's liquid assets, it's absolutely everything in their name. If you just look at the white non-Hispanic line, first that's the top line, so white non-Hispanic families, the typical family has $134,000 in net worth. That is not okay, that is not enough when you think of all that is going into that. But when you look at Hispanic and African American net worth, it's basically nothing. The typical black family, their net worth is $11,000. The typical Hispanic family net worth is $13,700. So it just really, this chart to me really underscores that while the economy isn't working well overall for low and moderate income workers, there are huge additional obstacles for racial and ethnic minorities that I think we just have to keep in the back of our heads when we think about policy. Okay, so I am now going to move on to, so he sort of covered that Trump was able to resonate with people on the economic message because the things that he was saying about the economy being rigged against regular people were actually totally true. And now I'm going to talk about what he's actually done. Okay, I think it's been 105 days now. Yeah. This is also my first 105 days. I was in the administration, and I was at EPI with Doug for years, and then I left and took a little stint as chief economist at the Department of Labor in the Obama administration, and my last day was the day Trump got inaugurated, and so I started the Monday after he got inaugurated. So his countdown, it feels like also my countdown. So the first thing he proposed this budget outline. It's unlikely, and we're seeing that it's not going to come through, but I think it's a value statement for him. He proposed massive cuts to the Department of Labor, massive cuts to the Department of Transportation. I'll talk more in a second about Department of Transportation and why that matters. But the Department of Labor, he proposed cuts of more than 20% to the Department of Labor. It's not going to happen, but just this value statement, it's just active hostility towards workers when you propose cutting 1/5 of the budget of the agency that is in charge with protecting workers' health and safety, protecting their wages and benefits, making sure that they have unemployment insurance benefits and job training when they lose a job. When you say you're going to cut 1/5 of the agency that does those things, is a real signal about how you prioritize workers' rights and wages. Okay, he quietly blocked what is known as the Fair Pay Safe Workplaces rule while championing Buy American EO. And I put these together because they're both in the procurement space, like government purchasing space, but this is a dynamic that we're seeing a lot in this administration. He'll be very loud about one thing that's supposedly pro-worker, while very quietly doing another thing that's extremely anti-worker. I'll start with the Buy American EO. So we have all these Buy America provisions in our procurement, which basically are procurement sort of rules, which basically says you have to, when the U.S. government is making purchases, they have to prioritize buying U.S.-made goods first. There's a bunch of provisions in that area. This Buy American EO that Trump really championed as being extremely good for U.S. workers is extremely weak teeth. All it does is says that agencies need to review those Buy American provisions with zero actual changes at stake. So it could end up being this huge nothing burger where nothing actually happens. So that's one thing he was doing in the procurement space. that is very likely to not end up being a useful thing for US workers. And then this other thing in the procurement space that's actively terrible for US workers. And the thing is that he did this quietly. Like, we knew Congress set up that this was, they had to sort of pass resolutions to block this rule, and then it went to Trump's desk to actually sign it. Congress had passed the provisions to block the rule, and we just had to keep desperately trying to check his, like, all the secret parts of the White House website to see when he actually signed it, because we didn't know it was happening. It's all sort of happened behind closed doors. He did eventually sign this, the final thing to block this Fair Pay Safe Workplaces rule. So here's the idea about the Fair Pay Safe Workplaces rule. It is so the background is that the federal government spends hundreds of billions of dollars every year on purchases of goods and services to private contractors for everything from, like, building interstate highways to providing concessions at national parks. So it's just there's a huge number of money that goes out the door to private contractors from the federal government. The Fair Pay Safe Workplaces rule, this is what it did. It said, if contractors who are vying for new contracts have a history of violating the very rules of our government, they actually have to disclose that. And that can actually be taken into account when we're thinking about awarding them new lucrative contracts. That's what that Fair Pay Safe Workplaces thing was about. We need that rule. Major federal contractors have been found to be regularly engaging in illegal practices that harm workers financially and endanger their health and safety. And here's the thing, without this rule, there's no mechanism in place to ensure that taxpayer dollars are not going to contractors who have a history of violating things like health and safety laws, wage and hour protections. Congressional Republicans and Trump just blocked this rule. And I think there's one more sort of important thing that is, I think about this rule in terms of its importance to workers, but it also really matters to employers who want to do right. Like, when you do something like block a rule that will not crack down on, but make it harder for low-road employers who cut corners on workers' health and safety and wage protection, if we make it easier for them to get contracts, you're putting employers, often union employers where workers have a voice on the job, you're putting those employers at a competitive disadvantage, because now they're competing with other employers who have just sort of carte blanche to violate labor standards. And so the Fair Pay Safe Workplaces, blocking that rule doesn't just sort of suppress wages and working conditions for workers, it also puts high-road employers who have safe workplaces, who do not violate wage laws at a competitive disadvantage. Okay, another thing that he did in this sort of, I had to totally pick and choose. I could have gone on forever about this. So, I just picked it. He delayed the silica rule. There's another similar rule about beryllium that I just chose not to put on there, but I'll show you where you can get a more comprehensive list after this. But focusing on silica, hundreds of workers die every year due to having been exposed to silica on the job. And it's respirable, crystalline silica, and the way you can think about it is when you see construction workers who are like grinding rock with saws, if there's a big cloud of smoke, they are breathing in crystalline silica. And so there's safety equipment that you can put on to keep that dust down, like wet saws. They'll like have hoses be on the saws that just keeps the exposure to silica down. The silica rule would have required those kinds of things to reduce workers' exposure to this respirable crystalline silica and save lives. The Trump administration has delayed enforcement of that rule in the construction industry, just needlessly exposing construction workers who are exposed to crystalline silica at further risk. And again, this is a case where it puts safe employers at a competitive disadvantage. Again, safe employers who are often union employers where workers have a voice. There are many employers that are already doing the things to keep their workers safe, but when you make it so unsafe employers don't have to, there's no regulations that force them to be safe, it gives them a competitive advantage. Okay, so silica rule, he nominated, I feel like I should worry about time. Are we, I'll try, 5 minutes, okay. I'm going to skip a few of these things. He nominated Neil Gorsuch to the Supreme Court, so there's going to be a ton of decisions coming that will have huge implications on for workers. Neil Gorsuch, every chance he gets, he has sided with employers over employees. The classic example, I'll just tell this story because it's too good not to tell. It was a case he dissented in. There was a truck driver who was pulling a trailer in sub-zero temperature. He didn't have heat in the cab. The trailer's brakes broke down or froze up. He pulled to the side of the road, called his supervisor. His supervisor said, you either stay with that rig until a repair person comes, or you just drag that trailer to the next gas station. And the truck driver said it was having symptoms of hypothermia and just unhooked the trailer and drove himself to safety. He was fired for leaving a trailer while he was under dispatch. He sued because under the Surface Transportation Assistance Act, a truck driver cannot be fired for refusing to operate a vehicle when he reasonably fears for his or other safety. He won that. The panel of judges said he should not have been fired. Gorsuch, new person on our Supreme Court, nominated by President Trump, dissented, describing safety goals as, and I quote, ephemeral and generic. So his dissent, I mean, everyone here knows this, but should raise huge concerns about his treatment of labor protections in future decisions that he will make. I'm just going to skip a couple of these things. We've got terrible people at the Department of Labor. This one's good. This is worth really talking about. He delayed the fiduciary rule. This is the wonkiest named rule in the world that has the most resonant explanation behind it. The fiduciary rule, this is the rule that simply says that if your financial advisor, just like your doctor, just like your lawyer, are legally required to act in your best interest, this rule says that your financial advisor also would be legally required to act in your best interest. When I talk about the fact that that is actually not always the case right now, people are just floored because it's such a basic protection. People don't know that there are loopholes you can drive a train through that allow financial advisors to do things like steer retirement savers towards investments that give them a commission while giving the retirement saver a lower return. That sort of stuff happens all the time. The estimates are that it costs retirement savers on the order of $17 billion a year, this kind of totally legal bad advice that they get. So the fiduciary rule would have tried to stop that. Trump is actively engaged with sort of in cahoots with the financial industry. That sounds sort of conspiracy theory, but it's totally true, to weaken or rescind that rule. So there's a bunch of stuff going on to weaken that rule. Healthcare plan, we've already talked about that, so I won't even go into the healthcare plan. I'll just finish with this. He hasn't done anything on infrastructure. He made huge promises about infrastructure that would have been really important to workers. Instead, he proposed cutting the Department of Transportation's budget by 13% in his budget. His proposals, which are, nothing is concrete yet, but what he's talked about, is giving private tax credits to private investors to do infrastructure. A couple of things on that. That means, in many cases, it's not going to incentivize new infrastructure spending because those private tax credits they often can just go to people who already have infrastructure projects planned, or in many cases are actually already have them underway. So in that case, it's just a windfall to those private investors rather than incentivizing new infrastructure. And the other thing is, it is not going to get this, the sort of unsexy things like repairing existing roads and bridges, fixing weak, leaky water pipes in Flint. It's not going to get those things done, may get toll roads done, but that's not the sort of the key infrastructure that we really, that is really degraded in this country. Okay, the final thing I'll say on this is, this is a partial list. It's unbelievably hard to keep up with, but we have this tool at epi.org/policywatch that just is a comprehensive cataloging of this stuff. And in every case, you can click on the thing, tell what actually happened in sort of the wonky version of it, but then we have a paragraph that's like, here's the fair economy impact that tries to say what this means on the ground, who are the winners from this, whatever the thing is, who are the losers. So hopefully we are updating that on a continual basis. Please give feedback. If you look at it, we want it to be as user-friendly as possible. But that will, it's only at the national level. We're thinking about trying to expand it to the state level, but right now it's at the national level, but hopefully it will be useful. And then I will want to just quickly go into that's what President Trump has been doing. Here's what he would be doing if he was really putting workers first. I will just skip all of the things on this agenda. What the key point of this is that they help tilt bargaining power back towards low and moderate income workers. Like, that's the thing that has shifted away in the last 40 years when we've seen stagnant wages, and the things on this agenda will help shift it back. We need to strengthen collective bargaining rates. Probably the things that have led to a more unequal economy, there's not just one. It's been a many things, but collective, sorry, let me get it right. The single largest factor in suppressing wage growth for middle wage workers has been the erosion of collective bargaining rights. So making it easier for workers to form unions, increasing the penalties for corporate violations of labor laws, halting and reversing the spread of so-called right-to-work laws in the states. Those are the kinds of things we need to do to give workers better leverage to bargain for higher wages and benefits. Boost labor standards. We need to increase the minimum wage. We need to increase the threshold below which workers cannot be denied overtime pay if they work more than 40 hours a week. We need to do things like pass laws that will ensure predictability in scheduling. Universal child care. Like, there's a bunch of things we could do here. I will mention a few, and I mentioned a couple of these things. Oh, thank you. Thank you. I'm not gonna let myself drink water because I'm gonna try to wrap this up really fast. Okay. I mentioned these are also sort of in the labor standards bucket, but I mentioned them because they're A, extremely important, and because B, Rhode Island has either done these things in the case of paid family leave and disability insurance, or is in the process of actively pushing for these in the case of earned sick leave. Sorry, I have paid sick leave here. These kinds of benefits are crucial to a modern workforce, and we are the only industrialized country that does not provide mandate a single day of paid time off for workers. One of the things that I think is an important background here is that workers who have high wages actually are quite likely to have paid time off from their employers, just on the employer volunteers to provide paid time off because they know that workers need them, and they're able to attract and retain trained workers when they provide those things. So we have huge inequality right now in the provision of these kinds of things, like paid time off, which just doubles down on the inequality that we know exists in wages. So it is absolutely time that we get federal policies along these lines so that we can level that playing field more, and the momentum is coming from the states. So the things that Rhode Island is doing is fantastic along these lines. We need strong enforcement of labor standards. Hundreds of thousands of employers routinely fail to do things like pay the minimum wage, pay the overtime people are owed. They fail to protect people from workplace hazards. So we need strong enforcement of labor standards. We need comprehensive immigration reform. I will not go into many details on this. I will just talk about the importance of bringing undocumented workers out of the shadows. Undocumented workers are extremely vulnerable to exploitation from unscrupulous employers. That puts downward pressure on their wages and working conditions, but it also puts downward pressure on the wages and working conditions of legal immigrants and native-born workers who work side by side with them. It just shifts the sort of existence of this exploitable group of workers, shifts bargaining power towards employers. So we need comprehensive immigration reform with a path to citizenship for undocumented workers. We need to pursue full employment. I mentioned this briefly, but full employment shifts bargaining power towards workers, because employers know they have to pay decent wages and benefits to get and keep the workers they need when workers have outside options. So we need to pursue full employment, reduce our trade deficit. If we were to, just quickly, our dollar is too strong. A strong dollar makes our goods very expensive to consumers around the world, makes their goods very cheap to U.S. consumers, so it increases our trade deficit, which costs U.S. jobs. If we were to just stop currency manipulation with our trading partners, we would actually see an increase of 4 to 5 million U.S. jobs. So at the very least, the president should make sure that any new trade agreements he pursues have provisions that allow for enforceable provisions to stop currency manipulation. And then finally, we need higher tax rates at the top to help redistribute some of the big increases in redistribute pre-tax income that we know has become more and more unequal. So this is what a worker-first agenda would look like. And just to wrap up, I hope that what I've shown is that the economic anxiety out there is real. It's based on very real things. And if we want to influence the people who believe that Trump has a winning economic message, I feel like we have to do three things. We have to acknowledge that the economy isn't actually working well for most people. We have to demonstrate that President Trump actually is not working to help fix that. And I think we need to show a really positive step forward with big, bold ideas that could actually fix it.